morning, cellists. Here we are, embarking on week 8 in the long lockdown. And this week, what are we going to look at? Well, as I detailed a little last week, over these following 6 weeks, having completed the first Bach suite, we are actually going to be looking at cherished pieces of music from the cello repertoire, one a week. And this week is one that's very dear to my heart, and I think I first played 42 years ago. It does have a connection actually with the Bach suites and my own history with these, and that is through Pablo Casals. As I mentioned in one of the previous lessons, my formative teacher was a student of Casals. And Casals actually brought this piece of music that we're going to look at to public attention as a beautiful piece for cello. It's a transcription of Faure's song Apres Reve. The song itself was written in the 1870s and was published as a group of 3, although they weren't written as a group of 3. It's a really beautiful piece of music, and then Casals transcribed it in 1910 for the cello, and it works very well as a song without words, just as a song on the cello. A little aside there, a little link, is that it was in 1890, just a year after this song was published, that Casals, as a boy of 13, first discovered the tattered manuscripts of the Bach suites. So just a nice little moment of time in history about the linkage between those 2 works and Casals and our journey today. Right, without further ado, let's look what else we've got lying ahead of us. Apres Reve, of course, some technicals, of course, and a new Feuillard study, of course. This week we're going to be looking at Feuillard's study number 15, and this will be looking at a similar time signature to the Apres Reve. The time signature, in actual fact, in the study is a compound quadruple time, which means there are 4 beats in a bar, and each beat is divided into 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it'll make sense when we come to it. The Apres Reve, although it's actually scribed in simple triple time, it sounds, because there are many divisions of the beat into triplets, it sounds as if it's in 9/8, as if it's in compound triple time. That'll seem more obvious when you look at the manuscript, and we'll discover it together. But these 2 pieces work quite well together, side by side. Right, beginning with the scale. The Apres Reve is written in C minor, and that is actually its original key, and superb for the cello, because of course we have a lovely resonant low C. And although we are actually not going to be using that string, nevertheless its resonances will be present in the music itself. So let's begin with the C minor scale. I'm just going to take harmonic today, and if we had a standard rhythm with a long tonic, be our sort of a standard approach. But let's just use it as a vehicle to get a bit more comfortable about these time divisions that we're going to be looking at. I mentioned the triplet feel per beat. Now, if you had a piece in 3/4 time, which the Faure is, and you want 3 notes in a beat, you just put a little triplet sign over it. But another way that you could do it is you could write it in 9/8, and then the triplets are already there. And that's what I meant by the different types of meter. And we're going to apply that idea of 3 beats, each divided into 3, onto the scale. Okay, so if we just sort of take that one step at a time, we have this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now where I'm counting counting are the actual beats, and each beat has 3 notes. Now when you're first getting familiar with this, you may prefer just to do it 3 notes for a bow, so you can really feel where the changes are, because particularly at the top it's a slightly awkward feeling where we're going around the top and beginning at the end of one hand shape, and it's just a little uncomfortable if you don't sort of pull it apart and look after it, if you like. So there's your challenge. I think quite a pleasant one, because there should be, ultimately we need to let go of the mathematics and try and feel a flow. Something like that, you know, we need to actually just feel the kind of like steady pulse, and that each pulse has got a triplet in it. If you need helping hand in your mind to imagine a triplet without saying numbers, which may confuse the issue with fingering, you can think of the word strawberry or butterfly, and those are quite useful words if you want to help yourself divide into the steady triplet beat, and don't be hurried. That'll be very important when we come to apply it to the Faure. Right, other technicals. I thought actually we'd just look at bow speed and bow weight in a very simple way. So if I took a fragment of a C minor, I'm actually just going to start from the E flat and move up and down to the C, and initially just going to just use the middle part of the bow in just an ordinary bow weight. I've chosen there actually the natural minor. Means you just have no B natural in it. Okay. So this is just sort of a standard kind of tone. And now just try a much shorter bow length. And of course we get a smaller sound, but it sort of sounds quite it's focused and small, you know. Now try taking the weight, where we really control the weight control is done by the fingers. You hold this bow a little bit more firmly in the fingertips to lift some of the weight away, and use more bow. You'll need to be fairly near the fingerboard so it doesn't turn too scratchy or metallic. If I play near the bridge, very eerie sound. It's got its place, but not in what we're looking at. In this sort of impressionist sound that we're going to be looking for, we want warmth and a summer haze. And that summer haze will be found nearer to the fingerboard, where the tension on the string is less. Floating bow by working very hard with these fingers, and therefore you'll need a little bit more length to it to go and have the breeze of your breath, which is the breath of the cello, is the bow. So experiment with that a little bit. We'll be looking at that in a different context in the study. Now let's move on to the study. The study is actually in the tonic major of our key of the week. So the key of the week being C minor, Faure Apres and Reve, so C major is going to be the key of the study. The beats are divided into triplets, and in actual fact, now I glance at it, I can see it's been written in common time, which means 4/4, and it's been written out with a couple of little triplet signs under the first 2 beats, and never again do you see the triplet sign, but that's basically what happens throughout. I could easily have written it in 12/8 and not bothered with any triplet sign at all. Anyway, without further ado, let's look at this first bar. So we have 6 notes in a bow. And I think in this first instance we're just looking at fairly much the full bow without thinking about bow weight at all, just whatever's just natural. What we need to kind of focus on there, and I'm just going to improve that example, is a quick hand speed of shift. So we don't hear as much of this, or don't really want to hear the gliss at all, ideally. So that'll going to be your focus. I would suggest actually taking a sort of a much steadier pace than I'm demonstrating. we'll rotate, quick shift back, which is inarticulate, 4 to 4, back to the start, rotation, small rotation on both arms, sorry, rotate here, and this is it again for a swift shift there. Now I'm only going to take these 4 bars up to this note. They are quite easy notes, and you might think, oh, that's not enough for a challenge. Oh, but I've got some ideas how you can make it a challenge. So the first challenge is get that left hand to be really nippy, even if you're playing very steadily. So if I took the example of the bar we just had, that this shift is quick, even if I play slowly, the left hand will still want to move quickly to the next note, so that it doesn't go have a nasty glissando like this. No, we want to avoid that. Okay, so that's your first point of focus, making sure you've got a fast action moving from 4th to 1st. There's a couple of places really nice actually, but bar 3 we don't have to worry about that at all. We've got an open A, yippee! It's very easy to move into 4th position there. That's a nice one. Remember, every time that we're crossing strings, especially with this 4th finger, rotate your arm so you get good arm weight above the little finger there. It helps you with the strength of the finger, contact on the fingerboard, and therefore good tone quality and an assistance to intonation, so you don't overstretch the hand to try and compensate for problems by not rotating sufficiently. Okay, so fairly straightforward, 6 notes to a bow, clean shifts. Now, how about we try different bow length? So if you just took a very short amount of bow in the middle of the bow there, so we can have a smaller sound, but it's still quite focused, quite present, and the challenge is all of that work happening in a very small amount of bow space there. Okay, that's one version of being quieter. Now another version of being quieter, we're going to try a real extreme, and we're going to try full length bows but floating through the full length of the bow a little bit near to the fingerboard. Pretty much a flautando sort of sound there. Don't be afraid of it. I know it might sort of sound a bit whimsical, but if we push to extremes on sound production, we really increase our palette of colour extensively, even if you don't want to use as much of that edge of the sound as we're experimenting with, when you come to apply it to a piece of music. So I think for today that's probably enough, those 2 samples of quiet. One, a short amount of bow, which will just make it quieter automatically, and the second is actually very, very demanding to try and use the whole bow at a fast speed, being therefore very light, extraordinarily hazy sound. And that brings us on to the haze and beauty of this fantastic song or melody, Apres un rêve, after a dream. Now this is really going to be a lot about bow management and tone colour. And some people don't like to use the word colour for sound, but if we understand by that, depth and fullness of sound, thin sounds, something that sounds a little ethereal. I mean, we looked earlier at this sound, the floating sound near the fingerboard, and if you try the same near the bridge, you get a much more edgy metallic sound. And perhaps you could describe those in colour terms. Maybe this is more like a gunmetal, and this more like, I don't know, cornflower blue in the wind. They're each to their own, but whatever works for you to understand that there are such a gradation of tonal colour and control in this, if you like, artist's palette that we have here, from the soft tension to the hard tension, depending on the speed of the bow and also the shortness of the string that we're using. we have a lot of variance to create a massive range of sound shapes, sound envelopes. Now, this opening, if you're going to be just maybe waking up from your dream, I think we want to just come in a tiny whisper and then sort of build gently. So if we're going to come in a tiny whisper, this would be an ideal opportunity for the edge of the hair as you begin. Have a lot of strength in the fingers to take the bow weight away from this first note. Now possibly that's too much crescendo when we've only just woken up, but it gives you some idea of something we could have coming in at the edge. And as you enter that note, you can start to tip over to a slightly more full contact. And ideally, so we've got maybe at least half of the hair width on the string for the string crossing to make it beautifully balanced as you tip over. And definitely as you're going towards the point, a flatter bow hair, even if you're keeping the dynamic lid on it a bit more than I was showing you there. At the point now, and you see in that 2-bar sample there, the last 2 bars, we arrived at the point, we stay there for 2 little notes with flat bow hair and a saucer shape. If you sort of dip your elbow a little bit, you can keep it feeling really slinky on the string there. And then we can come back for full length bow. At this point, as I've come into the heel, I have on that diminuendo come into a slight edge of the hair, but as soon as I begin the D flat, tip over back towards flat hair, so you could have got a nice balanced string crossing the other way to the opening bar. So at this point we've had the crescendo I've got the same note in a different location. The left hands need to be nice and swift with that move. And the bow is just going to continue regardless of the fact that you have to shift and change strings, okay? And there was a nice place that you could try out your floaty soft sound. And it just sounds so magic, like you maybe gone back to the slumber point. You know, if we started to wake up, maybe we're just nodding off again at this point. Just thinking again about that nice bow action in bar 6. Remembering that you keep moving and it's a tiny little lift as if you're doing the pebble skimming on the water, whoosh, whoosh, like that, in order to avoid hearing, we don't want to hear any sudden re-edge to the sound as you transfer to the D string there. So now in Casal's version, he notes to go from a second finger to another second finger, so this is inarticulate shift. And you may hear a little tiny gliss there, let's try not to. More modern versions tend to ascribe a 1-1 shift, which is again inarticulate, but it means it's on a bow change. Now, although that's you know, quite a neat place to do the change, you can unfortunately then really hear a reiteration of the front of the note. You're going to have a much better sound wave going from the A flat to the G. If you actually do Casal's fingering and do the shift early, it means it's a little further to go because you're shifting. No, it's no further to go. It's just the second finger shift within. Actually, I retraced my steps. It is further to go. You will be doing a whole tone shift when you do Cassell's fingering 2, 2, 1. But the benefit that these two notes next door to each other can be super soft and smooth one into the other. Whereas if you do the little nudge shift, the semitone shift 1, 1, I think it'd be very difficult not to get a bit of a front end sound on the G, and I don't think we want it. So I would go with the whole tone inarticulate shift that Casals recommends. One little aside, that at the time that he was playing this, more than a century ago, it was quite favourable to have glissandi, so a different kind of taste anyway. So we've now come to the end of that first sentence, and in actual fact it may be a good place to stop, but I think the following few bars, the following sentence is so similar in idea, I'm just going to give that to you today. So we begin with the G and the floaty bow. So that in that first bar, a lot of real length of bow, really float through. Don't mind the sort of hazy, impressionist sort of sound, if you like, that you're getting on that. You notice in bar 10, we have a little tiny little Z bow in there. Down, down, and back to the up. I'll show you again. Nice. And then to the appoggiatura cadence point. Breathe and. Little elements we've got in there. First, let me remind you that all of these sentences need to have true breaths in them. So there will be a proper breath before bar 9, a proper breath before bar 12, as if you were singing. There's actually also one at the beginning of bar 5. So imagine that you are singing it. Maybe try singing it. To make sure that we don't run straight in from one phrase to the next. You know, there needs to be a tiny bit of breathing a moment. So looking bar 11 to 12. So although you can continue the sound of this G, it's like a new beginning as you arrive on that C. It's a little bit more firm. And that this, I think you can start to open the valve of the tone quality, which means moving a little bit nearer to the mid-string area, and that this shift back for the falling fifth, remember that to go that far back rather harks to the future Rachmaninoff sonata there, for those of you who know it. This nice falling fifth, you'll need to lead with the elbow to make sure that you get back there in time and in tune, otherwise you're going to be a bit sharp or have a bit of a snag and glissando sort of sound in there, which we don't want. It's quite rich at this point. Sorry. And again, being careful with this final fifth here, and the bow being nice and light. And you'll notice also in those triplets, tia, ti da, da. You know, try and make them expansive, make them fill the whole beat. Don't be in a hurry, da 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 da. You know, just stretch the time rather than pinch it. Okay, so all together, this first phrase. right over to the flat of the hair, so that you can keep the tone control exactly where you want it to be. Great, well, enjoy these very different types of sounds to the ones we've been looking at, because we've leapt ahead by a good 150, 60 years or something like that from our previous explorations, and I hope you enjoy it. I'll see you tomorrow.